The first time I saw her walk into a room full of people who had dedicated their careers to saving lives, not one of them knew what to do with her. I wasn't supposed to be watching. My job was outside, managing the valet line at the south entrance of the Westin Peachtree Plaza in Atlanta, handing off keys, logging plate numbers, making sure the doctors and administrators and donors arriving for the Atlanta Medical Foundation's annual gala didn't have to wait more than 90 seconds for their cars to disappear into the parking structure across the street. It was early November, cold enough for a jacket but not cold enough that Atlanta had admitted it was winter yet. I was 26 and I'd been working that valet stand for 2 years. My younger sister, Camille, was halfway through her nursing program at Georgia State, and after our dad got cut from the Doraville Ford assembly plant, the same month she started her second year, the math of who was keeping things running fell on me in a way I didn't resent but didn't talk about much either. We had a one-bedroom apartment in Decatur. Camille took the bedroom. I used the pull-out couch and didn't complain because she was the one with 5:30 a.m. clinicals. My entire financial plan at that point was, get Camille through school, figure the rest out on the other side. The gala wasn't my regular assignment. I'd been tapped for it because someone called in sick and I was available, which is how a lot of significant things happen, through availability rather than design. The ballroom had floor-to-ceiling windows along the west wall, and from the right angle at the valet circle, when the light inside hit a certain way in the early evening, you could see straight through, black tie. Crystal chandeliers throwing light in every direction, a string quartet warming up near the stage, their sound coming through the glass in fragments, every time the lobby doors swung open. The kind of event where everyone already knew each other, and the conversations were about legacy rather than anything urgent. I was doing my job, taking a set of keys, marking a ticket, when the doors opened again and I looked up without thinking, and a woman crossed the lobby entrance without looking back at who might be watching. She was tall, mid-40s, in a deep burgundy gown that moved cleanly when she walked. The posture of someone who had spent years standing over operating tables and refused to lose a single inch of it to exhaustion. Her name was Dr. Petra Vance, though I didn't know that yet. What I noticed first, what you couldn't help noticing, was her right arm. From elbow to wrist, the skin was layered and regrafted, pulled in the way deep burn scarring pulls, catching the chandelier light at an angle different from the rest of her. She hadn't covered it. The gown was sleeveless on that side. Deliberately, I thought, or maybe defiantly. From where I was standing, it was hard to tell the difference. What I noticed second was the way the lobby adjusted around her. Not harshly. Nobody said anything. Nobody turned with obvious rudeness. It was subtler than that, a half step backward here, a sudden fascination with a phone screen there, two men in tuxedos who'd been mid-conversation and chose to finish their sentence facing slightly away from her. The unconscious choreography of a room that didn't know how to include someone who reminded it of something uncomfortable. If you believe in the kind of quiet courage that rarely makes the news anymore, the kind that lives in small decisions made in ordinary rooms, take a second right now to hit like, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe to Mercy Stories. Because what happened after this moment rearranged the next several years of my life, and I want you here for all of it. The event moved past cocktail hour into dinner, and then the string quartet signaled the shift into open dancing the way these things always do, gradually, gently, until couples started finding each other on the floor with the ease of people who had done this before. Through the window, I saw Petra standing alone near a column on the far side of the room. She had a glass of water, not wine, I noticed even from that distance. She was watching the room with an expression I recognized without being able to fully name it. Not sadness, not bitterness, something more like the face of a person who has waited out enough of these nights to know exactly how the rest of it is going to go. The face of someone who stopped expecting anyone to walk across the room a long time ago. I know that expression. I've worn it in hospital waiting rooms, in financial aid offices, in conversations where I could feel the other person calculating how much my situation was going to cost them. There's a specific kind of quiet that settles in a person when they've decided not to hope for the thing they actually want. My supervisor that night was a man named Rick. 15 years in, ran the South Entrance circuit like a military operation, had the particular energy of someone who had seen every deviation from standard procedure and eliminated them one by one. I was not supposed to leave my post. The driveway was not going to manage itself. I handed my radio to the other guy on shift, told him I'd be back in 5 minutes, and walked through the side entrance. The ballroom was louder on the inside than it looked from the glass. The music filled it generously, reaching into every corner. I was wearing black pants, a white dress shirt, a black vest, not a tuxedo but not wildly out of place if I kept moving with purpose. I crossed the edge of the floor with my pulse somewhere in my throat, keeping my eyes on the column where she was standing. When I reached her, she looked at me the way you look at something that doesn't fit the expected pattern. Not unkind, just working out the category I belonged in. I told her my name was Joel. I told her I worked outside. I asked if she wanted to dance. She studied my face for a long moment. Her eyes were gray and sharp, the kind that had made 10,000 quick assessments in high-pressure situations and never stopped doing it, even in social ones. She was looking for something. I think she was looking for pity or performance or the specific kind of charity that arrives with an audience and an agenda. She searched for a few long seconds. She didn't find any of it. She set the water glass on the ledge of the column behind her. She placed her right hand in mine. I want to be honest about the dancing. I am not technically skilled at it. I had been to 2 formal events in my life, both high school dances, and I had managed both by staying near the edge of the floor and moving with enough rhythm to look present. What I managed that night was closer to a slow, deliberate sway, 2 people keeping time to music in a room that had stopped pretending not to watch us. But she didn't need a dancer. She needed someone who had decided she was worth crossing the room for. Her grip was firm when she first took my hand, the grip of someone bracing, and then, roughly 40 seconds in, her shoulders dropped. Not dramatically, maybe half an inch, the kind of release your body makes when it stops anticipating impact. I felt it in her hand before I saw it in her posture. The tension in her fingers didn't disappear. It just settled the way something sets when it decides it's been held long enough and can finally rest. The other couples gave us room. I pretended not to notice. Near the end of the song, I looked toward the north wall and saw the mezzanine. A man was standing at the railing 15 feet up, silver-haired, formal, completely still. I recognized him from the banner outside. Dr. Alan Vance, founding director of the foundation. He had the particular stillness of someone who spends his life reading situations and was currently in the middle of reading this one. Not angry, not alarmed. Something more measured than both, the look of a man trying to understand what he was witnessing and what it meant. The song ended. Petra held where she was for 2, maybe 3 seconds after the last note fell. Then she stepped back, looked at me directly for the first time since we'd started moving, and said something I carried home with me that night. She said, "You didn't look at it." I knew what she meant. I told her the truth, that I had noticed, and it hadn't changed a single thing about why I crossed the room. She was quiet, then she said very steadily, very quietly, "I'll remember that." She turned and walked back toward the edge of the room. I went back out through the side entrance, took my radio from Tyler, and finished the shift without saying anything to anyone about what had just happened. Rick said what I expected him to say. I let him. I drove home at 11:45 with one image in my head, that half-inch drop in her shoulders and what it must have cost her to hold them level for so long before it. Later, weeks later, after I'd learned more about who Petra Vance was, I finally understood the full story behind her arm. 3 years before that night, on a Wednesday afternoon in August, a gas leak in the east wing of Grady Memorial Hospital triggered a fire that spread faster than the building's suppression system could manage. The evacuation alarm cleared almost every staff member from the affected wing within 4 minutes. Almost everyone. Petra was in OR 7 with a 9-year-old girl named Demi, whose abdomen had been opened following a collision on I-285 involving a delivery truck and a school van. The procedure wasn't finished. Closing her was not optional. Leaving was not something Petra would let herself do. She stayed. She stayed and completed the surgery in a room filling with smoke and heat while the building shook around her. A section of ceiling panel gave way near the door just as the final sutures were going in. The burns came from shielding the sterile field with her body. A reflex, she would later say, not a decision. Protecting the incision site from debris during a brief structural burst. Demi went home 12 days later without a single scar from the fire. The newspapers ran the story for about 2 weeks. Then something else happened and the cycle moved on, and what remained was Petra's arm and the nerve damage that had cost her full range of motion in 2 fingers on her right hand. She spent 8 months in reconstruction and physical therapy. She developed an adapted surgical technique. She went back to work, but the public events, those she had mostly stopped attending. The night of the gala was only her second public appearance in over a year. The morning after, I got a call from the hotel's event coordinator asking me to come in before my shift. Not about Rick, about a message that had been relayed through the general manager from a Dr. Alan Vance, requesting contact with the valet employee who worked the previous evening. I spent the elevator ride up to the 14th floor of the Valentine Medical Center, preparing an explanation for a decision I hadn't fully understood myself when I made it. Dr. Vance was standing when I came in, not behind the desk, but near the window overlooking the Buckhead skyline, hands in his jacket pockets. He asked me to sit. He asked me, without any preamble, why I had crossed the ballroom floor. I gave him the same answer I'd given Petra. I saw someone standing alone in a room full of people, and it didn't seem like something that should keep happening. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I counted the floors of the building visible through the glass. Then he told me about the past 18 months, about the invitations Petra had declined, the appearances she had canceled, the way she had gradually reduced her presence to her operating room, and almost nothing else. He told me he had watched his daughter withdraw from every space she used to inhabit with complete authority, and that he had not been able to reach her in any way that actually worked. He told me that at around midnight after the gala, she had called him, the first call that wasn't about scheduling or a work emergency in nearly 8 months. She had asked him if he knew my name. Within a month, I was working for the Atlanta Medical Foundation's outreach program, coordinating site visits for their Burn Care Access initiative across rural Georgia, driving out to clinics in counties where burn patients were being transferred 4 hours to reach specialists they should have been able to see locally. The work was real. It mattered in a way that I felt in my body at the end of the day, rather than just at the end of the month. Petra began attending hospital events again in January, quietly, selectively. She'd appear near the back of a room for 30 minutes and leave without announcing it. But she showed up. The moment I remember most clearly from that stretch of months came in March, at a burn care symposium down in Macon. She'd been listed on the program for 8 minutes. She walked to the podium, stood there without saying anything for a full 30 seconds. And in that silence, she reached up and removed the light cardigan she sometimes wore when she wanted her arm less visible. She folded it calmly over the edge of the podium. Then she spoke for 14 minutes without notes. About OR7, about the choice she'd made in 4 seconds and lived with for 3 years, about learning to operate with an adapted grip, about the girl named Demi, who was currently in the 4th grade and had never once, as far as Petra knew, heard the word she'd been lucky to survive. I was standing in the back of the room, and I could not have told you what my own name was for about 11 of those 14 minutes. There were setbacks after that, because there always are when someone starts reclaiming space the world had already decided wasn't theirs. A commentary piece questioned whether a surgeon with documented nerve damage should be performing complex procedures, framed as patient advocacy, which it wasn't, because her outcomes were peer-reviewed and consistently above the department average. The framing didn't care about facts. Framing rarely does. I found her in the Foundation's break room on a Tuesday morning at 7:30, phone face down on the table, coffee sitting untouched, looking at a spot somewhere past the surface of the table, the way you look at something only you can see. I sat across from her. I didn't say anything motivational. I told her I remembered the specific moment, 40 seconds into a waltz on a November night, when her shoulders dropped half an inch, and that I thought the version of her that existed in that moment was closer to the truth than anything anyone was currently writing about her. She held the silence for a while, then she picked up the coffee. By the time November came back around, the Foundation's rural burn care program had expanded into 6 counties it hadn't touched before. Petra had spoken publicly 7 times. She had agreed to give the keynote address at the annual gala. The Westin Peachtree Plaza ballroom looked exactly as it had the year before. Same chandeliers, same quartet, same calibrated architecture of charity and ambition that these events carry like furniture. I was there in a different capacity, Foundation logistics this time, not the valet circle outside. I stood on the inside of those floor-to-ceiling windows and felt genuinely grateful to be there. When the music shifted into something slow in the second half of the evening, Petra found me. Midnight blue this time, sleeveless on the right side, her arm visible, carried with the ease of someone who has made a decision about what belongs to them and stopped negotiating it with anyone. She held out her left hand. We moved across a floor where no one stepped back, no watch adjusting, no sudden interest in champagne glasses, no half step away. A few people watched, but the way you watch something that means something to you, not the way you watch something that makes you want to look somewhere else. Near the end of the song, she leaned in slightly, just enough that it wouldn't carry past the two of us, and said, "You know what I thought the first time I watched you walk across this room?" I shook my head. She said, "I thought that man is about to get fired." I laughed, the kind that's real, not performed. She laughed too, a quiet one, nothing borrowed about it. Then she said, "And I thought he's going to do it anyway." The music ended. The room kept being a room. No spotlight, no announcement, just the ordinary resumption of an evening among people who had, for a few minutes, been close to something worth keeping. Here is what I know now that I didn't know before I handed Tyler that radio. We talk about courage like it only counts in fires, like it has to be loud and visible and time-stamped, like it requires the cameras to show up while it's still happening. But I watched Petra Vance stand in a room that had already decided how to see her, hold her shoulders level, and not leave. I watched her pick up a coffee cup on a Tuesday morning after reading something cruel and keep going. I watched her fold a cardigan over a podium in Macon and say the true thing out loud in front of 200 people who had not been there for the part that made it true. None of that made the news. All of it took everything she had. I crossed a ballroom because I had nothing to lose except something I hadn't thought to value yet. What came after, the talks, the rooms, the counties that now had burn care access they didn't have before, that belongs to her. I just happened to show up on the right night and refused to look away. She did everything else.